Hello everyone, it is Wednesday, September 29th, and I know at the end of the last vlog I said, well, the next vlog is going to be about copy edits, but I have been vibing so hard on brainstorming my next YA thriller that I was like, this is literally the point of vlogging, so here we are. I'm vibing really super hard on my next YA thriller. Like, I've had a couple of breakthroughs in like the last week. I had a conversation with my editor. This is what I am developing for my option material. It hasn't been purchased yet, but I wanted to chat with my editor about what she might like to see, and it's been really kind of cool kind of bouncing some like vague ideas off her a while ago and then working on my own to develop what I wanted to do, which will hopefully kind of grease the wheels for submitting this as my option. So as you may know, because I have mentioned this before, I'm writing an isolation trope thriller. Basically, my next couple of projects are like, what's on my bucket list of what I love in thrillers to write and what can I challenge myself to write. And this one, my editor threw a slight wrench in the works, and I'm very much like, I'm still in the debate phase. I've been going back and forth. I've been running ideas past different friends, even sending my editor back some like buts, like, well, if this, then this, how do you feel? Because she asked whether or not it might be multi-POV. The fun thing about an isolation trope thriller, as you may know if you also like this trope, if you don't, get into the trope, it's great. I've got a whole video on it, mostly adult titles, because this is very prevalent or more prevalent in adult thrillers. We haven't really seen a lot of YA ones, which we can talk about. Part of the fun is you take a cast of characters, you isolate them somewhere, and then you start killing them off. That is the fun of the trope. It is the and then there were none trope. And so multi-POV is a really interesting option and question. I've never done it before, or I've never done multi-POV since I've been published. I have an earlier unpublished book that was dual, but dual is different from multi. I've talked people out of writing multi because it can be challenging. But let's back up a little bit. So what do I have? I know it's isolation trope thriller, and what I started with months ago was I want to write an isolation trope thriller, and I have what I feel is a pretty good motive. Still fine-tuning it, but like I have like the foundation of the why. Don't have characters, well, now I'm starting to have characters, but as you know from previous vlog, I mentioned in Brainwave I had when I went to lunch with a writer friend about my conceit, about my setup, because I was like, well, how do I get these teens alone in an interesting and semi-organic way? It's fiction, but we still want to like squint and kind of believe that it could happen. And I love the setup. I got the conceit. So what has happened in the last week? I had a second brainwave about something I can do with the conceit that will help the isolation trope thriller along even more, because something we have to contend with in modern society is when you isolate a group of people in a location, you have to figure out how to take away their phones and the internet. Because in today's, like in the past, it's like, oh no, I'm stranded on an island, and then the phone lines go down. What do I do? Well, if you're today, you're like, oh, I got Wi-Fi on my phone, or I'm gonna like go find a signal. And so I came up with, I've made decisions about how I'm going to isolate my characters more and cut them off from communication, which is really, really nice. And when I came up with that, the magic happened. I always know I can write a book when the first line, which cascades into the first paragraph, which cascades into the first page, when it pops into my head. And that happened like 3 or 4 days ago. And I rushed to my computer. It was late at night. I actually think I might have turned my computer off, and I went back and I sat down, and the first page poured out of me. The voice of the first page poured out of me. Still don't know who this character is. I mean, I've been working on her since that happened, but like, it started to form. And from there, I was like, okay, another thing I'd been waffling on. Is this in first person or is it in third person? I love third person in select doses and select story types, and especially in adult, I feel third person can work really, really well for a isolation trope thriller, including potentially multi-POV. So I did a test. I took the first paragraph and I wrote it in third person as well. And I read over it and I got this gut instinct and I shared it with someone just to confirm. The third person felt a little too old. It felt a little bit adult, and if I were writing an adult thriller, it would have been a great opening. And a little too British, weirdly, which could be I've just come off of reading some British thrillers and maybe that tone was in my head, but what's weird is that it doesn't feel like that in first person. Anyway, first person feels right. So we will be doing first person for sure. Oh, I have an idea to do some third person interludes. I did pitch that to my editor and I'm still working on selling her on it, which brings us to she suggested multi-POV, which means who the heck are my characters? I can't even say yes or no to multi-POV if I don't know who my characters are. If I don't know who my killer is, which I don't yet. So the last couple of days has been like this whirlwind of good panic. So I started with names. I went to the baby name list, the social security list. I started jotting down names I like to try to form characters, like start creating a cast. I like to work back from that. A name stuck out to me and I was like, I feel like that's an anchor character name, and another name stuck out to me and I was like, I feel like that's a foil character for that character, starting to come together. And because I need to figure out who the killer is, I was like, well, you should probably start actually trying to develop these characters, not just their names. I was like, well, what are the archetypes I want to have in this isolation trope thriller? So I came up with a few of them. I'm attaching them to names. And I'm like, oh, this character looks like they might be a good candidate potentially to be an interesting killer for reasons XYZ. It's still a maybe because it could be this character, but I could do this other thing too. And then actually today I was brainstorming or like bouncing ideas off of a thriller writing critique partner and they had additional suggestions. I was like, I have a lot of potential options, which is actually nice, but I gotta start making decisions. But anyway, the reason I did this is because multi-POV complicates things, because the decision that you make for who your POVs are, how many there are, cast size, especially in an isolation trope mystery when you know more than one person's gonna die, the math is pretty critical, because it's like, how many is too many characters for people to keep track of and care about? How many is too few where it becomes super obvious who your killer is? That's also a problem, especially with multi-POV, which brings up the question, is one of the POVs the killer? I don't know. I don't know. So that's where I am. I have the voice of a first page for sure, whether that's going to be the single POV that I carry through the whole book or whether it's just one of the POVs. Definitely feels like the anchor POV. I think I know her name. I know the dynamic that she has with at least one or two other characters. I think I know who my victims are. I don't know everything about them. I know I'm going to kill them. I've actually had that list for a while, which I love as evidence that like literally every book comes to me a little bit differently. Like you should be as free-flowing in your process as you dare be. I've arrived at each of my thrillers in a slightly different way, and perhaps once this is a tiny bit more developed, I'll make a video about that. I talked about it in my workshop that I did for the Writing Mastery Academy, where I was like, okay, this book I started with setup and then I did motive and then I did killer, but on this book I started with twist and then I worked back to, like, it's different on every single book. And so it's interesting that characters in the killer are last here, and I haven't had this much of a question mark of who the killer is previously. It's just every book is a little bit different. But what's nice is since I have the deaths and I'm starting to figure out the characters, I'm starting to have a structure in mind, a flow to the plot arc, which is good. Here's the thing, and you're gonna go, if I ultimately decide to do multi-POV, I'm gonna discuss it with my editor because it's like 2 versus 3 versus 4 versus more. There are many possibilities. And if it's more, do we do POVs of people who die? Is there the POV of the killer, which ultimately you have to do if you do everyone's point of view? Or like if only X number of people survive and that's how many POVs you have, someone's the killer, which is fun, but do I have the skills? I'm gonna have to outline, asterisk, ish. So something that I did for a mentee, an author mentor match, who has a multi-POV suspense book, part of my notes was, I actually think you need an additional POV. So what I did for her, I created a master spreadsheet where I basically outlined the book that I had just read that already existed, chapter by chapter. And I put the chapter, I put the POV it was in, the main crux of what happened in the chapter, like the new thing that happened to build tension, and who I thought the POV should be in, and other edits I had in mind. So I was like, well, this chapter is currently from the POV of character A. Character B is the new POV. I think you have to work into the story. Give this chapter to character B instead, and then this one swap it, keep this one the same. Anyway, I basically ended up outlining a multi-POV thriller for someone else as a revision tactic, but it was a neat little spreadsheet. So if I do decide to do multi-POV, I think I'm gonna have to create a similar spreadsheet. I think I'll still be pretty lost in the woods of the middle. That's always the part I really can't outline, which leads to the whole I really can't outline. But as you know, I plan a decent amount of these thrillers, and this one, if I do multi-POV, I have to do more planning. So that will be a really interesting challenge. So that is where we are. I honestly wanted to take a longer break from writing, but this one's coming to me, and the good thing is NaNoWriMo is in approximately a month, and I think I might do it. So this is good. Figuring out as much of this stuff as I can so that I can basically outline as much as I am personally capable of, which will never be a full outline in the traditional sense, but plan this out as much as possible. We'll probably maybe try my synopsis trick, which I did with my next YA thriller, because I had to submit it on proposal, which had a synopsis, so we'll have to do the same thing here. But I'm going to plan it out as much as possible, start writing, getting a feel for it. I might do more testing. Maybe it is more testing of the multi-POV. And then figure it all out, write as much as I can, and submit it for my options. So feeling really, really, really good, honestly. And I'll get copy edits in a couple weeks. So this is either going to end up being a brainstorming only vlog, a brainstorming Preptober vlog, or I'll mush it together with copy edits. Let's see what the timing does. It's Sunday, October 10th, and I got my copy edits a week early. I actually got them yesterday, the 9th, and I'm genuinely a little concerned for my poor editor, because that means she was working yesterday, Saturday, to get those over to me before she goes on vacation. But it means this is officially both a Preptober brainstorming and the copy editing vlog. We're doing them together because they're gonna work out time-wise. So I got the copy edits yesterday, the 9th. They are due by the 25th. But what's so lovely is my editor clearly went through all of them and kind of primed me in her email. She said it's mostly echoes, those echoes that haunt me, i.e. I'm gonna have to do more of kind of those oft repeated words. Yet another pass, plus some like minor continuity stuff. She seemed to indicate it's nothing too crazy. I haven't looked at anything other than the first page, so we're gonna see. And what was really, really cool, the copy editor left me a note on the first page of the manuscript and basically said like, good job with the twist. Like, it's my job to pay attention to the details. And like, I guessed one thing, but not another. I enjoyed it. And I was like, that was kind of cool. I'm like, yes, it's kind of this nice, and she's right, it is literally her job to pay attention to all the tiny details and track things like continuity wise and make sure that I don't mess up. So that is a nice compliment. So if you're new to this, what do copy edits mean? I mean, if you're not new to this, I have to refresh myself on how to do copy edits every single time I do copy edits, because it feels like, well, brand new, like it's like an old familiar friend. But copy edits are in some way counterintuitive. They're the polar opposite of what I just did most recently, which is line edits. So the copy editor has gone through the Word document with track changes on and it's gone through the manuscript with a fine-tooth comb. So I'm working in Microsoft Word. This is a pro tip, at least certainly how it works at Penguin Random House. I have to do my copy edits in Microsoft Word. If you do them in any other program, it can create problems with copy edits. It can mess up the formatting, which is why I recommend to writers like to invest in the Microsoft Suite if you get a book deal. I digress. So with line edits, my editor also used track changes, and I was accepting or rejecting her changes. And I personally, when I go through dev in line, I don't leave track changes on. I like to produce a clean manuscript. Then I should probably maybe ask my editor if she likes it that way. Well, it's the way that I do it, but copy edits is the opposite. You have to work with track changes on, but you don't accept or reject anything. If you agree with the copy editor's edit, which you can see with track changes, you leave it alone. I think that is the hardest and like most counterintuitive part, because you're like, I had to like remind myself. I literally was like, let me open up the copy edited document from the Ivies just to remind myself that I didn't touch any of the track changes. So that's part one. You don't cattail in the background, that's Leo. That you don't touch anything that you agree with. If you disagree with something, you can re-key it, i.e. you have your own track changes on and you change it back to what it was, but it shows them that you change it back to what it was. The other thing is there are comments all along the side, and I have to respond to every single comment. It's basically acknowledging that I either agree or disagree, and agree, like acknowledge the comment. So if it's like a basic comment and I agree with it, I just reply with okay. If I don't agree with it, or if it's more of a query and less of a agree disagree and more of like a question, I answer the question in the comment. So that is basically how it works. I just go through, and generally me with copy edits, I tend to accept most changes. Most of the time, sometimes you do get a copy editor who is a little more trigger happy. It does vary. I've heard stories where there were copy editors who inserted a lot more of kind of their personal style or preferences or writing into a manuscript, and an author had to stet a lot of things. Stet is when you basically reverse whatever they're proposing to do. But I generally have had good experiences with my copy editors, and I tend to accept most of the changes because it's the same thing with line edits with my editor. They're trying to improve what I've done. In many cases, it's just kind of changing around a sentence to improve clarity, thinking about word choice, obviously correcting actual grammar mistakes or typos. Like I just tend not to have a problem with what copy editing is suggesting most of the time. So this should be pretty smooth. Now, every single time I forget that copy edits are more intense than I think they're gonna be. So I'm gonna say right now, with the knowledge that I might be wrong, but I feel like this won't be too bad. I also think that like 2.5 weeks is more than generous. I have a really good feeling that I will be able to go through copy edits pretty easily, maybe even turn them in early. We'll see. I'm gonna start today, Sunday the 10th, because I want to see how they go and start like banging through some of them. And you know, I guess, and that's the thing, they always take a little longer than I think. There's the potential that there could be spots where I do have to like think a little harder than usual and maybe rewrite something. That doesn't always happen in copy edits, but sometimes it does. And the important thing for you to know, I don't know if there are specific rules about how much you're allowed to change in copy edits. There probably are. But I know that by the time you get to past pages that you can actually get in trouble for making too many changes. But I guess for copy edits too, because if you make really substantive changes, they have to bring the copy editor back in. But that is basically where I am. I'm gonna be copy editing this manuscript. I've kind of been in a holding pattern since the last time I did an update on the brainstorming side of Preptober. But it's October 10th, like we're still pretty far out, so I feel like really deciding on structure, getting as close to outlining as I'm gonna get, that kind of stuff is gonna happen in a couple of weeks, but this is where we are. time to head to Target for my snack run. Not entirely for Nano, some will carry into Nano. Honestly, this is my snack run for completing copy edits this weekend, and I have a whole weekend planned of writing dates with friends because button chair is the only way I'm getting this done. I did it last weekend. I went to a cafe with some people and vlogged very, very poorly, but I did do it. I got through like 50, 60 pages. So that's the plan for this weekend. Today it is Thursday, October 21st, I should say. I didn't get picked for jury duty, so it's full steam ahead finishing this darn book, and I haven't really been Preptobering as I've been copy editing, but like it's counting down to November, so something's gotta happen. It is Saturday the 23rd and I am finishing my copy edits this weekend. So I've got a whole day planned today. I'm having brunch with my friend Laura and then we are going to work. She is revising, I am copy editing, and then tomorrow I'm also going to get my butt outside to a cafe because we're gonna get things done. So it's Monday the 25th, the day that my copy edits are due, and I sent them to my editor about an hour ago. And what an auspicious day, cause listen, little ASMR, the kind that I like. It's raining in Los Angeles, which makes it a beautiful day, and I don't say that ironically. I genuinely love rain, and it doesn't rain here this much, so I'm genuinely pleased. And I have to go film from this angle because the lighting is very bad in my apartment, and this is the only place where I'm getting some decent natural light. So where does this leave us with NaNoWriMo, Preptober? Because it's a comin'. As always, as I approach NaNoWriMo, I'm getting nervous. You know, you kind of get into that space, so if you're feeling this as well, it's normal, of am I gonna do it? Maybe I won't do it. It's totally okay if I won't do it. And so I'm going to write during November. I'm going to do some Nano activities, but I might be more of an intentional rebel than not. Mostly because my day job is truly picking up. I think it's going to be a pretty wacky November, though as I said, there are some opportunities to take time off, so that will be good. So where am I with Preptober? Definitely put it on the way back burner as I was working on those copy edits. But when I had my brunch with Laura, my writing day with Laura the other day, we both talked about our respective projects. I CP'd her thriller and she's revising, and I would like vomited a lot of my brainstorming stuff at her about my book because they share some trope similarities, and it helped me, like talking it through always helps me make decisions basically and figure some things out. So I know who the killer is finally, and it's really the same character I have been waffling on the entire month, kind of like circling this character, but I worked out their motive is so much richer now. I have a much richer idea of what I'm going to do with them, which will help me write that character. So like I've solved the base issue. I still have a lot up in the air. There's still things I'm definitely waffling on, but I have a pretty good idea of what I think I want to do. I haven't done that concrete step of beating out Act 1. that might be a November 1st activity. Like, we're gonna see how this goes. We're going to play it by ear, which means this is where I leave you for the vlog, because the next one I want to start in November. So the next time you see me is going to be in a NaNoWriMo themed vlog. Very, very exciting. But thank you for being here with me for this one. Copy edits. We did it. We got it done. Preptober happened. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will continue to make vlogs about my writing process and journey. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching and happy writing.